IB Nation, what's going on? Ryan Roberts, Director of Recruiting here, joined by Sean Davis, your favorite recruiting analyst here at Irish Breakdown, the face of recruiting. Sean, excited to get in to this one today. Well, it's not tonight. What am I talking about? But if you joined me for yesterday's show, me and Brian had a pre-recorded show where we worked through the offense, worked through the defense of Ohio State, took a little bit of a deep dive into some Jim Knowles stuff defensively, talked about a couple of the favorite things that the Ohio State passing offense like to do conceptually. So broke down that today. What we have on this show is calling this one stacking up the Irish and the Buckeyes. So we're going to preview the matchup for a couple of minutes, standpoint of how this game will go, the on-paper matchup, the battle of the groups and players, and how the strengths and weaknesses kind of impact the game. So we're going to be working through passing offenses, passing defense, rushing offense, rushing defense, and just kind of give this a little bit of a conceptual understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of each football team coming into this game. And then over the rest of the week, we'll be diving a little more in the weeds into some of the players and things we're expecting and the expectations. This is more of a broad strokes. What does Ohio State do well? What does Notre Dame do well? Or at least what have they done well? And then try to project forward to how those things need to improve and how Notre Dame needs to attack a couple of the strengths of Ohio State and the weaknesses in order to have some advantages. So that's what we're going to be doing. The second part, of course, we're going to be doing the mailbag. So I already had a couple awesome questions that we're starring already. So as you have questions filing in, please put them in the chat. We appreciate you all, of course, for doing that. As always, I did a solo Sean yesterday of an hour mailbag all by myself, man. And I was a little hoarse afterwards. My wife was like making fun of me a little bit, but it was a great show as always. Shout out to Brian Driscoll. Although he can't be with us today, he is coming on his way back to Canton. He will be back tomorrow. Also, quick reminder tonight, and I'll do another reminder as we get through this, but IB Nation Sports Talk is going to be having a pretty fun segment tonight, and make sure that you tune into that. How you tune into that and how you remember everything that's going on is hitting that notification bell at the bottom of this podcast. You should do that right now. You should also hit a like, share this podcast. Sean, I'm excited to get into this one, man. Again, we're only a couple days away, and football's back, man. It's about to get real. We're taking a look, deep dive into what Ohio State does well, what Notre Dame does well, man. I guess a good way to start, Sean. How you feeling today, brother?
I'm feeling really good. I'm starting to feel really good about this team because in these matchups, because I'm loving what I'm hearing not only from the coaching staff, but I love what I'm hearing from Notre Dame players in anticipation of this football game. So have to be excited to chop wood today and talk about the matchups with you, bro.
Oh, absolutely, man. No, I'm ready to get into it. Again, I know we talked about this last week, but a couple of new wrinkles here at Irish Breakdown. We have the mailbag every day, but tonight Sean Stires will also be joined by Vince D'Addario to do a little bit of the mailbag section. You know, you can't keep Vince away from a mailbag, man. So make sure to tune in again, 6:00 Eastern time tonight for IB Nation Sports Talk. All right, Sean. So let's get into this, man. I think a good way to start is as I share a little bit of what we're going to be doing today, just broad strokes over what Notre Dame was as an offense in 2021, what Ohio State was as a defense, just a broad overture on this. And then we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics. What makes them successful on both sides of football is kind of what we're aiming to do. So I'm going to work down a little bit of this list, and we'll kind of break down some important factors here and what matters when we're taking a look at this, right? So we have not only what the points per game, yards per game, all that good stuff is per contest. We also have where that ranked fundamentally across the entirety of the FBS of college football last year. So Notre Dame, 35.2 points per game, averaged 426.5 yards per game, over 6.1 yards per play. They ranked pretty well as far as their red zone percentage, which you see at 88%. Their touchdown percentage working from the 30 to 50 yard line. Some pretty good numbers, Sean, but I think we've talked about this a ton, right? Notre Dame's offense needs to take a big step forward in 2022. So I think you see a lot of numbers here, like the 426.5 yards, for instance. If you watch the games last year, it's pretty middle of the pack, right? Like we're expecting a big improvement, despite the fact that the offense maybe wasn't as prolific from a yards perspective or yards per play perspective, still top 20 in scoring offense. But again, Notre Dame, I think, needs to take that a step up in 2022. And you have a nice first test against the Buckeyes, who have a new defensive coordinator, have some talent, obviously, on the defensive side of the football. But I think it really does start with the offensive side of the football for Notre Dame, the ability to take Tommy Rees's tutelage and to show a lot of growth in that area.
And you have to start it with Harry Hiestand and how comfortable he makes Tommy Rees. I think a lot of people are overlooking that. One of the best acquisitions we know, simply because of the struggles of the offensive line the last 2 seasons, was indeed Harry Hiestand returning to Notre Dame, but it was bigger than him just being the offensive line coach. As an offensive coordinator, and you know this the way you break down film, a play caller has to have confidence to go into his bag, the way he really wants to go into his bag with his play calls. He needs confidence in that offensive line. Like, if he doesn't have confidence that they're going to be able to hold up, to be able to do or give time to the quarterback or give space to the running backs and the other skill position guys to do what they need to do to get open, that limits you. Like, you're scared of calling certain things because it's like, man, if I leave them 5-on-5 or 5-on-4 and they don't have the ability to consistently hold up, I don't want to put my quarterback in that position. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think Tommy Rees is very comfortable with the plays that he's going to be calling. I think he's going to be very comfortable with being aggressive. I think we saw his aggression a little bit with Jack Cohn in the Fiesta Bowl, specifically in the first half, how prepared he was for Oklahoma State and what they want to do. And I expect Notre Dame to come out and be prepared, to go out and be efficient and go against that Ohio State defense. And then it's going to come down to the adjustments. Yes. And then once the adjustments are made, it's going to come down to the players making plays. That's football each and every week. Like, it doesn't change. Like Marcus Freeman says, it's 53 1/3 by 120. Like, I don't care where you're playing. The game is the game. I don't care if you're playing it at the local park. I don't care if you're playing it on the field in the NFL, high school. The game is the game. And as we look at these numbers and look inside the game, you see Notre Dame being able to put up points, but in order to take that next step, they're going to have to up the points. I'm cool with the yards per game. I love the fact that they have the chance to get back to their rushing attack from 17 and 18, maybe putting over 250 yards per game up. But more than that, I'm looking for more explosive plays out of this offense.
Yeah,
not much yardage, but explosive plays and efficiency. The average, would you say the average plays per game for any team probably ranges from 75 to 85, somewhere in that range?
As far as, say it again?
Number of plays per game.
Yeah. I mean, it's always going to be skewed a little bit to the high octane offenses that push the tempo a little bit. They might get up there like 90 or 100, but yeah, for the most part, I say that's a pretty safe number.
Yeah. And if you're running 85 plays per game, I don't know I think you want this offense to be versatile, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Tyler Buckner mentioned this yesterday. There are times when we need to be the ground and pound, run the ball, keep your offense on the sidelines. But then there are other times that we can transform and we can become this spread you out, throw the ball around, be explosive, let our guys catch and run type of offense. And that's the type of versatility you really want to see in a young offense as they go into the horseshoe.
Sometimes, and you hit on 2 points, Sean, that I think are critical and they're key for this offense this year especially. Sometimes when you see these raw numbers, they can be skewed. They 100% can, because if you're beating up on a bunch of bad football teams and you're laying a goose egg against the better teams in your schedule, the overall average might look a little better than what the quality of that scoring output was offensively, for instance, right? Yards per play, it's like yards per play can be very skewed, because if a team isn't efficient but they're explosive, you might still score a pretty high yards per attempt type of thing, right? Like a yards per play doesn't necessarily mean that you were a good or efficient offense the way that you would necessarily break that down, right? Like, I think that you have seen that in recent years. Notre Dame last year, I did not think they were efficient offensively, if I'm being completely honest. Not really. And they weren't explosive last year, in my opinion. They need to be both of those things. You mentioned both of those in your kind of talking points. Efficiency, they need to be better running the football. They need to be better. You need to play in front of the chains, not behind the chains. I think that's going to happen because you have the stable of running backs. You have a really talented quarterback that is a running threat as well. And you have that improved offensive line, right? In theory, I would be very surprised if they were stagnant or they got worse somehow, right? Like they're going to be a much better offensive line in 2022. So you look at those things, and I am feeling optimistic about how much better this Notre Dame offense can play. And the other good thing is, although they did not coach against Jim Knowles in the bowl game, they did see a version of his defense, right? They saw the Oklahoma State defense last year that was derivative off of what Coach Knowles had done at Oklahoma State. And you see that he's immediately taken in to the Ohio State team where good in some areas, right? I mean, like 22.8 points per game needs to be better, but it's not like horrific, right? It's not an awful starting point. They're middle of the pack in yards per game at 372.6, 59th in the country. I think when you're starting to see like the red zone percentage, touchdown percentage here, they're lower, right? Like they are lower down those totem poles. So like those things need to be better. And the third down percentage was lower too at number 100. The one decent thing that they did do last year, though, out of pretty below average to middling defense, is they did force a decent amount of turnovers. They had 20 turnovers last year if you're Ohio State. So I think that you're optimistic if you're Ohio State, but I'm interested to see just how quickly Coach Knoll gives that turnaround. I do think Notre Dame has a little bit of an advantage in the fact that their offense has been structured under the same guy over the last few years. I mean, we'll talk about Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees, I think it finally has the shackles off to kind of do what he does a little bit more, and I'm excited to see it. And also you have a transition where Coach Knowles is coming in, and it's going to be his first game. There's going to be some transitional stuff that's happening. I'm curious to see, though, Sean, for me, just how good this Ohio State defense is, because the talent is not a question mark, right? It's not. Yeah. It's just how quickly Coach Knowles can get it turned around this year, especially in the opening game against maybe potentially the best team that they're going to play all year.
Look, you talk about this, you look at the all 22 and break down film with the best of them. And I know that going from Oklahoma State to Ohio State is a different type of athlete. I'm not sure if there's the same toughness that he had up front in the defensive front at Oklahoma State with this Ohio State defense. That's going to be called into question, and I think Harry Houston and the offensive line are going to test that toughness early. His DNA, and that's something that Tommy Rees can look at, right? Different athletes at Ohio State, but every play caller, offensively or defensively, has a DNA. They have their go-tos in certain downs, distance, situations, points on the field. They have their go-tos. So you can kind of guess what they're going to call and what area they're going to go into that bag and present to you as a coordinator. I think that's something that Tommy Rees can definitely look at the Fiesta Bowl, because Jim Knowles' defense, they like to start out very traditional, nothing fancy early, and they like to play the game like a boa constrictor. And as the game goes on, they like to tighten the screws a little bit more and a little bit more. And then when they get into the third quarter and fourth quarter, you'll see them being uber aggressive, coming after you, playing more bump and run. That was their counter to Notre Dame's explosive plays in the first half, and Notre Dame just didn't make the plays. They had the opportunities. Michael Mayer had an opportunity for a big play. Lorenzo Styles Jr. had a big opportunity on the post pass. Jack Cohn barely missed him. So these are the opportunities that Notre Dame, I think, they're going to have against Jim Knowles' defense. And just like Tyler Buckner said yesterday, they have to execute. That's exactly what it's going to come down to, execution. As I said before, he has players. The one thing you see right here looking at the numbers, third down defense.
Yes.
42.1%.
It's not great, man. It's not. I mean, there's like 130 teams in FBS and they ranked 100th. So it's not great. It's not great.
And if Notre Dame can take advantage of that, what does that mean, Ryan? That means Notre Dame is going on sustained drives, which means C.J. Stroud is on the sideline.
Right.
Which bodes well. If Notre Dame is converting third downs, that is definitely going to be part of a recipe that could lead to a win for the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, no, it's said really well. I'm interested to see because the one thing, Sean, is Oklahoma State's defense was not incredibly talented,
Yeah.
but they played hard, man. They were physical. I mean,
Yeah.
they were small at multiple positions. I mean, Colin Oliver was a small edge rusher. Malcolm Rodriguez was a small linebacker, but they were tough kids, man. Like that's just like flat out. Like they were extremely, extremely difficult. And we had a comment here that I want to pull up real quick. Actually, it looks like it's a little off the screen. So, Zachary, I'm going to bring that one. I'm going to store that and I'm going to bring that back up later because it looks a little funky with the video on the screen. But basically, talked a little bit about he said it took 3 years for Oklahoma State players to get the Knowles defense down. And you're not wrong, Zachary. You're not wrong. I just think it's a different situation, though, right? I mean, so you go to Oklahoma State. We talked about the numbers yesterday. It was a bad defense. I mean, they had just given up like 32 points a game the previous year, and they were just not great, or 30 points a game, somewhere in that ballpark. It was an atrocious defense, and there wasn't a lot of talent. And you knew that it was going to be a slow rebuild of the defensive side of the football. Ohio State, those expectations are completely different. Jim Knowles is coming in, and I think he's going to be a little more simplistic early on because he knows I have talent, right? Like I'm not stressing for talent. We don't have to recruit some, the Jimmies and the Joes. You already have Jimmies and Joes in the room at Ohio State. That's not the issue. The issue is the scheme wasn't good enough and the development wasn't good enough. So I think that he's going to come in there and he's going to say, like, I need to keep things a little bit simplistic and I need to work off of that. We'll see if that ultimately happens. But I just think it's a little bit of a different situation. So I don't think that those are apples to apples. I think that's an apples to orange comparison. So, Sean, this is Notre Dame's offense, obviously, against Ohio State's defense, how they stacked up after the 2021 season. Obviously, new season. We'll see how things develop. But we want to kind of move on a little bit. We're going to work through a little bit more of the weeds of what these numbers mean, right? So this is Notre Dame's rushing output from 2021 versus how Ohio State defended the run in 2021. So Notre Dame was not a great rushing offense last year. We know that. We've talked about it. Despite having a really good running back in Kyron Williams and some talent up front, they were not a very good team, a very physical team, I should say, and they were not able to establish a new line of scrimmage. So their rushing numbers weren't great last year. Averaged 144 yards a game, which was 83rd in the country. Again, out of about 130 FBS programs. Only 4.1 yards per carry, which was 72nd. 23 touchdowns, which is 54. And they gave up, man, this number is atrocious, Sean. I saw this number and I was like, almost threw up. They gave up 82 tackles for loss last year, man, which is a crazy number. A lot of negative runs associated with Notre Dame in 2021. Adversely, Ohio State, pretty decent numbers for the most part, but I think there is some context to consider here, right? Yeah. So they gave up 126 yards per game, 126.8, 3.7 yards per rush, which was 33rd nationally, 28 for the yards per game, 17 rushing touchdowns, 47th, and they had 83 tackles for loss, which was 48th nationally. Not terrible numbers, like it can obviously improve, but I mean, Sean, I look at those raw numbers, I'm like, okay, that's not maybe as bad as maybe we've been portraying, right? But I think that when you looked against the good teams on the schedule, Michigan's one that pops out immediately, right? Michigan was able to run down their throat. And there were some teams that just were not good rushing offenses last year. And I think that, again, that could skew the number a little bit. It could skew the number, in my opinion. I do not think that Ohio State was a great run-stopping defense last year, especially when it mattered most. But right here, Sean, I think that this, for Notre Dame to be successful, this is the biggest turnaround that needs to happen on this breakdown today, in my opinion. Yeah. They need to be able to run the football better. They need to be better on the offensive line. Yeah. They need to be more decisive as runners, and that's, again, off of the offensive line. And Tyler Buckner, I think, is going to open up a ton in the run game. I mean, the read option game, quarterback read game, I think that's going to give a lot more possibilities to this Notre Dame offense. They need to be better at running the football than they were in 2021.
Well, look, we go back to when Harry Hiestand was here. Like I said, he had a season where they actually put up over 3,000 yards of rushing, right? And it goes back to what we heard from Jason Adamiola yesterday. The line sets the tone. He was clear. We're going to be a physical team. The offensive line and defensive lines are going to set the tone. And I believe Harry Hiestand has that mindset in this offensive line. Jared Patterson looks like he's going to be able to tough it out. And if not, the Andrew Kristofic, Rocco Spindler will come in and they'll play well. I fully expect them to play well because, they have two anchors at the right and left tackle that gives confidence to them to be able to play well along with, Josh Lugg. So I fully expect Notre Dame. Right now, if you were to ask me if Notre Dame could hit the 3,000 mark in rushing yards, if the O-line is as good as we've seen in fall camp, with those three running backs that they have, that would be a good bet to take.
I mean, let's call it like this, Sean. Tyler Buckner is a quarterback first and foremost, but they basically have four running backs. If we're being completely honest, man. Like, he is a runner. I would not be shocked, and I don't think it's going to happen. But if you told me Tyler Buckner ekes out the leading rusher on the team with like 800 yards, it'd be like, okay, I can see that. Like, he's a dynamic runner in his own right. And that kind of strengthens your argument, though, the fact that they have a lot of great options to run the football this year.
Yeah, and with that being said, I really don't think Tyler Buckner is going to even come close to being the leading rusher. I really don't. I really expect big things from Chris Tyree this year.
Yeah.
And I think the combination of Tyree and Aldrick Estime are going to be a good 1-2 punch. Thunder and lightning, to borrow that phrase.
And mix in a little Logan Diggs too, man. Yeah. There's some potential there.
Yeah, and then like you said, Logan Diggs. Logan Diggs is so versatile, especially when you watch the way they use him in the passing game in fall camp. Like, his versatility, he can be that third down back for this team, that specialty third down back that can go into the slot. But Chris Tyree can go into the slot and motion him out of the backfield. They have so many different ways that they can attack you, and I think the offensive line is definitely going to set the tone. I fully expect them to be somewhere close. Definitely, you can take the over on all of these stats. You can take the over on the rushing yards. They're going to improve on that. They're going to improve on yards per game. They will improve on yards per attempt, touchdowns, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're working through these numbers. I saw someone ask in the chat. We're working through these numbers because this is what the teams were last year, right? This is what they have to improve off of. This is the baseline understanding of what we know about this team. And I think that when we're talking about this particular game, running the football is such a big bonus to Notre Dame because not only is it just how their offense, I believe, is going to be structured, right? With a dual threat quarterback, with a stable of running backs, with a improved offensive line, it also keeps Ohio State's offense off the field if you're able to ground out the run game a little bit. You're able to move the chains and stay in front of the chains, and there's a lot of nice options. Aldrick Estime, the kind of the thunder to the lightning of a Chris Tyree, and Logan Diggs kind of mixing and matching skill sets. There's a lot of good things to get out of these stats, fellas and ladies out there, because I think that you can kind of see where their improvement needs to happen for these teams to reach their potential. Like, Notre Dame needs to be a lot better run the football this year, and particularly in this first game against Ohio State. Ohio State, again, I think some of these numbers are a little skewed. They need to be better on defense in general, but I think their running defense does need to be better, right? And so those are where these numbers are coming from, and that's why I think that it is important, right? You're not built, your 2022 resume is not going to be built off what you did in 2021, but in the opening game, this is what we're working with. This is what we have to go off of. This is what these teams were. We haven't seen a football game yet. Yeah. So we have to kind of guesstimate, I guess, to a degree, what these teams look like. So that's a little bit of the rushing offense for Notre Dame. That's how the Ohio State defense stopped the run last year. This is what I think a big matchup in this football game. So, Sean, we're going to kind of move on a little bit. We're going to break down the Notre Dame passing offense from 2021 to the Ohio State passing defense. So another interesting matchup here, Sean, because when you look at Notre Dame's raw numbers, not bad at all. I mean, they threw for over 3,600 yards. And again, these numbers can be a little skewed because Notre Dame wasn't a very good rushing team last year. So they were forced to throw the ball down the stretch of the season, right? And down the stretch in general. Yeah. They needed to throw the football to be a decent team in 2021. So 3,600 yards passing, 282.5 yards per game. That is ranked 20th in college football. Again, remember, Notre Dame does not have a conference championship game, so they're only playing 12 regular season games, then a bowl game last year. 8.1 yards per attempt, which ranked 37th nationally. 12.7, 47th nationally in yards per completion. I think that, Sean, that we're going to break that down a little bit here in a second because we talked about an offense that needs to be a little more explosive, but they do 30 touchdowns in 2021, which was ranked 25th. 10 interceptions, which was 54th, which is still a pretty solid number. Pass efficiency, 149.99, so basically 150, which was 32nd. Not a bad spot at all. The big thing here, though, the low number, is they gave up 35 sacks in 2021, and we talked about the inconsistencies that Notre Dame had from a pass protection perspective. So, Sean, I think that last number is telling for me. Notre Dame has to be better, just offensive line in general. We talked about the push they need to get from a running game perspective. Also need to protect the passer a little better. I think it's also going to help that, hey, Tyler Buckner's a little more athletic, a little more loose. He's going to maybe get out of a sack or two that maybe Jack Cohn could not have last year. But my biggest thing is that yards per completion percentage and the yards per play percentage, average, 12.7 yards per completion, that number needs to go up. Notre Dame needs to create much more explosive plays this year. Like, that is the biggest thing that I'm looking for, especially in this game, because me and Brian talked about, Sean, I'd love to hear your insight on this. I think that early on, Jim Knowles is going to say, hey, we're not letting that team run the football on us. So we're going to crowd the box a little bit. We're going to give you some one-on-one opportunities because Tyler Buckner, you're a sophomore, first start in your career. You have to show us that you can beat us. And I think that is going to give a lot of opportunities to creating some explosive plays on Saturday.
Oh, opportunities for big plays will definitely be there. Definitely be there earlier. Like I said, I expect both of these teams to, fight the urge to believe ghosts of the past for both teams. I fully expect Ohio State to fight the urge to believe that Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be similar to what they've seen on film the previous 2 years. Like, they have to fight that urge. Like, they're looking at it on film and they're like, oh, yeah, we can handle this offensive line. And then, fully understand, like, this isn't the same coaching. These players are now sophomores. And the two guys that anchor the outside, they're pretty good. And the two veterans they have at guard are pretty good. So this is not going to be, Notre Dame's offensive line from last year. They have to fight that. In turn, Notre Dame is going to have to fight, Michigan pushed them around. Utah pushed them around. And they're going to have to come out, even though that's going to be the same mindset that they have with that offensive line. We want to establish the run and push them around a little bit. Like, just don't take it for granted. You still have to go out there, play football, and execute. Sacks or something that I think naturally are going to come back just based upon what you talked about. The different Jack Cohn couldn't avoid anything.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't avoid anything. Like, Jack Cohn just went down on at least 33% of those 35 sacks. He just went down before he was even touched. And I think Tyler gives you a different ability not only to get out on the edge, avoid sacks, but also to maneuver in the pocket and manipulate the pocket and be able to make throws or take off and get chunk plays with his legs. So I do think the sacks will come down, which I think will affect the pass efficiency. I think just the overall protection in pass pro is going to affect most of these things we see on the side of the passing game for Notre Dame. Yards per completion definitely needs to go up. They definitely need to be more explosive. But I think the opportunities are going to be there because the yards per attempt and the ways things are going to scheme out. And what we've heard from Marcus Freeman is run the ball and be aggressive, right? That means establish the run. And then when you pass the ball, look, we're not trying to dink the ball down the field. We're going to hit you. Like, if you're going to bring that eighth man in the box and you're going to try to run blitz and do other things, we're going to hit you over the top, hit chunk plays, and be more explosive. So I agree with you. I expect these numbers to be dramatically different this year for the Fighting Irish, even though I don't know if they get 282 passing yards per game. I don't know if they need that with this team, though.
I think that number will naturally come down a little bit, and I don't think that's a negative, right? And I know we're talking more about just the matchup against Ohio State, but I think on an average game, like, I would expect that rushing number to go way up and the passing number to just go a little bit down. Like, that's just a natural kind of you're gonna just kind of distribute the wealth a little bit, right? The volume perspective from the running game comparative to the passing game. I think you're just going to be a more successful rushing offense in theory. But I mean, my biggest thing, Sean, and you mentioned it again, explosive but efficient, right? Like there can't be a ton of mistakes, especially against Ohio State. Like Notre Dame can't turn the ball over in
No,
this game.
no,
Like they have to be efficient with the football because
yeah,
you don't want to limit your amount of possessions against an offense that Ohio State has. And we'll talk about the Ohio State offense here in a little bit. But if you look at the passing defense for Ohio State, and again, these numbers, I'm going to keep repeating this. Some of these numbers are a little skewed because someone said, Ohio State, the rushing numbers were down because they had to stop rushing because they're beating a bunch of teams. So they had to throw the football. You're absolutely right. Some of these numbers are skewed. And the reason that they gave up 245.8 yards per game partly is because I think that they were a little underwhelming in the secondary at times, but also they're beating a lot of football teams, right? So like that number is going to rise up a little bit, but they ranked 96 nationally in yards per game. Yards per attempt was 6.9, not bad, 32nd overall. They gave up 21 touchdowns, had 12 interceptions as a team. The 21 touchdowns ranked 70th in college football last season. Pass efficiency was at 129.67, and they had 36 sacks as a team, which I also think that they were going to want to get that one up a little bit, even though it's not a terrible number. But Sean, I think that the biggest thing for this, right, is this passing. It's twofold. They have talent in both. We're going to leave the linebackers out of this for a second. And I know that's technically false because linebackers have to play pass coverage, obviously, right? But I'm going to hone in on the defensive line. I'm going to hone in on the secondary. And this is how Notre Dame, I think, needs to win the football game. There is an assumption, and it's cool right now, right? Because we're in the section of the postseason where you're projecting a lot, right? Like you're thinking, like, what can this team be? We're in that section of the offseason. And Ohio State has a lot of talent in the secondary. I'm going to start from the back ends. They have a lot of talent. Denzel Burke's a really talented corner. Made freshman All-American. Was their best corner last year. Cam Brown, I think, is a good football player. Good corner when healthy. His problem is he's been banged up a little bit. Ronnie Hickman is a good tackler. Needs to be more consistent in coverage. Josh Proctor's coming back from an injury, so we didn't see him almost. I think he played in 2 games in 2021. Mm-hmm. So, they have other guys like Lathan Ransom, who I know is going to play a little bit. And, that a Notre Dame fan should be very familiar with that name because Ohio State obviously beat them for Lathan Ransom. So it's a talented secondary, but Sean, I personally just don't think it was very good last year, right? Like it's a talented secondary, so they're going to make some plays because they're just long and athletic. But I didn't think it was a very disciplined secondary last year. I think there was plays to be made here. And for Notre Dame to make some explosive plays, they need to take advantages of any false steps, any eye discipline issues, all those types of things. My big thing that I'll be watching is not the front as much for Ohio State. I'm curious to see how much better they are in the back end from a pass coverage perspective.
The one thing that stood out during their fall camp is that they were thin in the defensive backfield, right? And they were really hoping that the guys you just mentioned, the starters, were going to be able to play against Notre Dame. And I think recently Jim Knowles said most of those guys are going to be ready to go, recovering from nagging injuries. But it's been a history for those guys to be injured. And so we'll see if they can hold up. You force them to make tackles. You force them to come up in the run game. And then you force them to defend the full length of the field. And I think Tommy Rees, with his play calling, is going to do that. He's definitely going to test them. But if one of those guys go down, they really don't have much behind them other than youngsters. And that depth is going to be called into question. But like you said, they have playmakers. They're guys that were also recruited by other top programs in the nation. So, yes, the talent is there, but it's like anybody else. They have to go out and execute on Saturday. They have to go out and play, and we'll see what happens. But, yeah, the passing efficiency and everything, you can talk about it being skewed because, they're playing from the front and people have to pass, so they pass the ball a little bit more. Look, man, you have an opportunity to stop the play each and every time they hike the ball. And either you do or you don't. So as much as we can talk about being skewed, if we look at the all 22, I'm sure we'll find a lot of mistakes that will line up with this. I was taught, look, this really shocked me. I was talking to my guy the other day who played college football, and he said, Sean, I guarantee on 90% of the plays, there's a breakdown in coverage somewhere. It's just a matter of whether or not the quarterback has time enough to find it or whether or not he's smart enough to find it. But it's very rare in football in general that everybody is covered. Like,
Right.
that's rare. And so
Yes.
you can talk about the players they have, but I mean, just football dictates that someone's going to be open, and they're built to rush the passer and play from in front. That's how they're built as a team and as a defense. And whether or not you think it's skewed, they have not executed to their best on the back end. And the numbers bear that out.
Yeah, we just had someone in the chat say that we're comparing a Coombs-led defense to a Knowles defense and not bringing that up. I think we mentioned that a little bit already, that it's going to look differently under Jim Knowles. But you can also look back to the history of Jim Knowles and know that his first year at both Duke and Oklahoma State, his last two stops as defense coordinator, they were not very good that first year, right? So there is a transitional period. Now, I think it's going to be a smoother transition because there's more talent for Ohio State. But we've mentioned that a couple times, Frank. We've mentioned that a couple times. So
yeah, but see, this is the hypocrisy, bro, and I don't like that. Like, don't talk about the new coaching that's arrived at Ohio State and don't acknowledge the new coaching that's arrived on the defensive side of the ball for Notre Dame. Right. That goes both ways. You can't point out the inefficiency of the Notre Dame secondary and then say and laud Jim Knowles and his ability to teach and change things with the Ohio State secondary. That goes both ways, So if you're going to say that, then you have to say that about Notre Dame as well.
Yeah, and Frank, I wasn't trying to come off all huffy and puffy. I was just saying it for everyone in the room that maybe just popped in, that we have talked about that a little bit. So my apologies if the tone was not proper there. But Sean, the other layer to it is we talked a little bit about the secondary, obviously. Defensive line, I'm very interested to see this one, right? Because there sure is talent, right? Like if you drew up a defensive end in a lab, it would come out looking like Zach Harrison. Now, the on-field production has not been there, but that's what it looks like. Jack Sawyer, that's what it looks like. JT, that's what it looks like, man. Yeah, there's a lot of talent up front for Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree. He's very reminiscent of Buckeye fans will probably. He was a great Buckeye, didn't pan out in the NFL, but like you said, he looks like a Vernon Golston, like he came out of a lab, and you would think he would be able to dominate far more than he has. He has one more season to prove it. I don't think he's going to jump out and have a huge game going up against Joe Alt or Blake Fisher. But that's a guy that you talked about. And, of course, Tyler Buckner mentioned number 44 yesterday in the press conference. Like, that's the guy on the defensive line that you watch, that you look for. So, talent isn't the problem. I don't think talent is the problem for either one of these defenses or offenses. It's been about, as we look at these numbers and we see numbers that might be positive and we see numbers that might be negative, it's been about execution. And you probably can connect that to coaching a little bit, but ultimately you can be coached up as much as you want to. It's up to the players to make the plays.
Yep, that's it, man. At the end of the day, players got to make the plays, right? The scheme can be as great as you want, but they got to show up on Saturdays. There's no doubt about it. I'm interested to see. Again, we're not going super in depth, but I think that Ohio State has opportunity to make some plays against Notre Dame as interior pass rushers, because Josh Lugg, has been a little up and down. He's moving back from offensive tackle to guard. You have Zeke Correll moving back in the center. Last time we saw him, he wasn't too great in 2021. Like, let's call it what it is. And Jared Patterson's questionable, might be able to play, it sounds like, but like he's going to be limited a little bit, it sounds like, or it's going to be a backup in Andrew Kristofic, potentially in for Notre Dame, and they're facing off against Tyleik Williams, who I think he's going to be a rising star. I do. I really like Tyleik Williams. So we'll see. But there's going to be a high emphasis to see just how improved this pass defense is for Ohio State against Notre Dame, and how improved Notre Dame is from a explosive perspective. Big plays. So now, Sean, we're going to move over to the other side of the football, which I know Notre Dame fans are all worried about, man. And I get it, right? I get it. Notre Dame had some nice moments on defense last year, some parts that we have talked about tremendously that need to improve. It's absolutely right. Ohio State, on the other hand, had one of the better offenses all in college football last year. They're tremendous. I mean, Ryan Day, I don't have to keep clamoring for Ryan Day. He's a tremendous offensive coordinator, tremendous offensive mind. He's done a great job at Ohio State in on the offensive side of the football. So if we look at some of these numbers, though, start with Notre Dame, of course. 19.7 points per game last year. Pretty good. 14th overall in the nation. Pretty good number. Again, schedule may not have been the toughest. So, again, it's skewed a little bit. We're not going to lie about that. Yards per game, 359.7, another decent number. Yards per plays, a little high. You want to get that down a little bit at 5.3, 37th nationally. You see the red zone offense against Notre Dame. Touchdown percentage from the 18 to 47 yard line was only was ranked fourth at 38.3%. Their third down offense ranked 10th, so they did pretty good to get off the field, and they forced 25 turnovers. That's one thing Notre Dame did pretty well last year. Talk about 6 forced fumbles for Isaiah Foskey, some interceptions, obviously, on the defensive side of the football. So Notre Dame did a decent job at forcing turnovers last year, but they're going against a different animal, Sean. Notre Dame did not see an offense on the schedule in 2021 like they're going to see only a couple days from now. Ohio State, 45.7 points per game, which ranked first nationally, 561.2 yards per game, which is a silly number, just an absolute silly number. Yards per play was 8 yards per play, which is up. That's comparative to 6.1 that Notre Dame had last year. Their red zone offense, it should say there, was pretty good for the most part. I mean, their percentage was good. Scoring touchdowns needs to be up a little bit there. And we see that they did not turn the ball over a ton either. Ranked 9th in total turnovers there. So we were playing a historical offense. Obviously, Sean, you're playing but you have a defense that has a pretty good baseline. There's a new voice in the room, obviously, with Al Golden. So let's start on the defensive side of the ball. What do you feel like, just looking from these numbers, what are things that maybe Notre Dame needs to improve on? What does Al Golden need to do in order for this to be a successful option? And we won't dive too. We're going to dive more into what they specifically need to do from a run stopping perspective and a pass coverage perspective. But what are just a couple of general things that you think Notre Dame needs to do well in this game to be successful against the Buckeyes?
Be aggressive. And as I said previously, don't believe in the ghost of seasons past. Like, you look at these numbers from last year and you say, yep, makes sense. I looked at the roster. I saw Travion Henderson. I saw C.J. Stroud. I saw Chris Olave. I saw Garrett Wilson. And I saw Jackson Smith and Jigba. The numbers make sense. They make sense. And it starts and ends with that. And you move forward, and you have to be honest and say, well, 2 of those guys on the outside are gone. Do they have a history of producing the next great wide receiver? Yes, but it still has to be proven. It has to be proven. I go back to last year, after the first 2 matchups between Minnesota and Oregon, nobody was touting the Ohio State offense. They were more disappointed than anything from their showing against Minnesota and their showing against Oregon. So that just goes to show you can be whatever you want to be on paper until you go out and show it. It really doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It just doesn't. And I hope Al Golden and his defense and the defensive backfield and the front 7 hope they say, that was last season. We don't care about those numbers. We're coming after you. We're going to show you different things. We're going to tackle you and get you on the ground. We're not going to allow the big plays. We're going to force you to move the ball down the field methodically, and we know that's not what you want to do. And when aggressive play callers like Ryan Day are forced into that situation of being methodical, they get aggressive, and quarterbacks make mistakes. Wide receivers can run the wrong route that are starting for the first time in their big game. This is football, man. You have to play the game. Yeah, the numbers look daunting, and you expect they have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, Ryan. Like, you can't dance away from that. They have probably the number 1 pick in the upcoming NFL draft at quarterback. He's a dude. They have a first-round wide receiver. And Jackson Smith and Jigba. You can't get around that. He's the type of player where he's going to get at least 15 targets this game.
Think so? You think it's going to be high? Yeah.
Without question. He's going to get his targets. He's going to make his catches, and he's going to get his yardage. You just can't allow him to make the big play. You can't allow him to catch a 10-yard pass and turn it into a 70-yard touchdown.
You need to, yeah. Those, I mean, I would even argue, Sean, that like you need to limit the 18-yard catches to 8-yard catches. You know what I mean? Like you can't let a broken tackle or a bad angle in space, whatever it is. Like you need to limit impact when you're playing against players like Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr. Emeka Egbuka scares me, man. I'll be honest. Everyone keeps talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'm like, Emeka, man, he could break some tackles. He's explosive. He averaged like 21 yards a catch last year. Like he's a dude as well. So
the Fleming kid is, I mean, they have
good player. Yeah,
they have depth at the wide receiver position, but this is going to come down to, like we've been saying, this is football.
Yep.
Like I don't care how great your receivers are. If C.J. Stroud is on his back or he's being forced to throw in 1.7 or 1.9 seconds, all of that speed and all of that route running really doesn't mean anything. And Notre Dame has been very transparent all off season. We have to stop that run. We have to stop that run. And for me, just watching fall camp, what I see right here is this game might come down to the red zone, right?
It could. I
look at Notre Dame, the touchdown percentage in the red zone. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good. And then you go to the offense, you know, it is what it is, man. That red zone could decide it, though. And I will say this, Notre Dame has spent an incredible amount of time in the red zone in their practices.
Mm-hmm.
They spent a lot of time working red zone. I think they fully understand that they need to score touchdowns and they need to force Ohio State to work the ball down the field and tighten the screws in the red zone and force field goals. Like they understand the task at hand. They know what's in front of them.
For sure.
They just have to go out and execute. But yeah, for me, for both of these stats those were last year. Those were last year. It doesn't mean it's going to be the same this year.
And I think that one similar spot that, and I love that you mentioned this, Sean, I really do, is that Notre Dame, I think, needs to be good on third down, need to be good in the red zone. You mentioned those, right? Like Ohio State was really good on third down last year. They converted 52.6% of their third downs. Notre Dame was a top 10 national team defensively in that regard, though, and give a 32.2 that we see on the screen here, right? Yeah. So Notre Dame needs to, look, I don't want to call it a bend but don't break defense, but it is to a degree, right? Like Ohio State's going to get some, right? They're going to make some catches. They're going to make some plays. They got dudes. But when you're in the red zone or you're on third down, you need to get off the field, man. Like that's just the point blank to it. Like I don't want to see long touchdown runs. I don't want to see explosive plays. Notre Dame needs to limit their impact and get off the field. That's ultimately what they need to do. Right. And so, yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned the red zone. I think that is going to be a big emphasis in this football game. Notre Dame needs to make the big plays in the most. So, like, if it's a bend but don't break defense, there's eventually a breaking point, right? Like, you get to that point where it has to break or it doesn't break.
Right.
Notre Dame can't break. That's the point to it, in my opinion. So,
or like a rubber band, you get to that point and then you snap back.
Exactly. You
start to push back. So
either you're durable or you're not, right? Like either you can handle the stress or you can't. That is the big moments in this football game. So I love that. I love that analogy. I might have to use that, Sean. That's a good rubber band analogy. I like that, man. So let's dive a little bit more into the numbers and specifics to Notre Dame and to Ohio State. So Notre Dame's rushing defense last year, some good moments, right? They gave up 135.5 yards per game. You want it to get down a little bit, but 37th nationally, not a terrible spot to be in. No. 3.9 yards per carry. Sub 4 is not bad. Again, need to be a little bit better. They only gave up 13 rushing touchdowns, which is a pretty solid number, 22 ranked in the nation. And they had 82 tackles for loss as a team. When you compare that to Ohio State, again, I feel like Ohio State needs to be better at running the football, but the numbers don't really back that up, if I'm being honest, man. Like I felt like there were times where Ohio State could have been even better in the run game, and they got a little pass happy at times, I think. But they have obviously a lot of potential in that area, and they had some really good moments. They ran for 180.3 yards per game, which is only 47th nationally. That's comparative to the 5.5 yards per carry they averaged, though, Sean. That tells me they weren't consistent to continuing to run the football, but they were productive running the football when they chose to do so. 24 rushing touchdowns, which is only 52nd nationally. One thing they did well is they only gave up 48 tackles for loss as an offensive line and as a team. So there weren't a ton of negative plays in the run game, which, again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the 5.5 yards per carry. You didn't give up a lot of negative plays. So you're pretty much consistently creating yardage on the run game. So when I look at this team now, Sean, I think Notre Dame needs to be better stopping the run consistently. I think there were spurts of good last year, but let's be honest about this, right? We're being objective, not subjective here. We're not being fans here fully. Yeah. I am a fan, but I'm not being a fan here. Notre Dame was not great against the run last year, and there were moments where I don't want to say they missed a lot of tackles in space is one thing that Notre Dame had a problem with last year, right?
Yeah.
Yards per carry still isn't awful, but we know when we watched that team last year, there were a lot of moments where I'm just like, it needs to be better than that, right? Because they played a lot of passing offenses in 2021 as well. Like you're playing the USCs of the world that aren't going to be consistent running the football, even though Keontae Ingram actually had a pretty good game against Notre Dame last year. But they played against a lot of offenses that were more passing offense than rushing offenses. So the number probably could have been even higher than what it was. So that's the context is important. Notre Dame needs to be better. And that starts from the second level for me, right? Like you talk about J.D. Bertrand had good moments last year. Needs to be better. Yeah. Maris Loifeld needs to be a dude coming back from injury.
Has to be.
And Jack Kaiser needs to be better in year 2 than he was as a first-year starter. That the second level is the key for me, that it needs to be better in 2022.
You're spot on. And the numbers bear it out. We have constantly said that Notre Dame needs to get under 100 yards per game on the ground defensively. They need to get into that top 15, top 10 area to truly become a defensive juggernaut and a championship defense. The task is at hand once again. They feel good about their defensive front. They feel good about the depth along that defensive front, and they feel like their linebackers have gotten better and deeper. You talk about what Jack Kaiser, J.D. Bertrand, and Bo Bauer were able to do, being called on, especially with the injury to Maris Loifeld leading into the season last year. He was supposed to be the guy in the middle of that defense. He returns. Can he stay healthy? If he does stay healthy, can Kaiser and Bertrand improve upon and make the plays, make the tackles when they get a quarterback in the hole on a blitz? Can they get him down and not allow him to get out of the pocket and make a 15-yard run for a first down in clutch moments and big-time moments in games? That's going to be very important. But J.D. Bertrand, immediately after Fiesta Bowl, told Irish fans that's exactly what they were going to do. He said, preparation is not the problem. We have to get better and make the plays. And he spoke for the team and said, starting right now, we're going to dedicate ourselves to doing so. So you can only take him at his word until we see anything different on the field this fall. The stats also bear out, like you said, tackles for loss, good. Middle of the pack needs to be better. That goes directly to Jason Adamiola. That's who he is, right? And he's going to get that opportunity to get upfield, get more tackles for loss, to be more disruptive. But just like the other guys we just talked about, you can't miss the tackle. You can't whiff on tackle. You have tackles. You have to be able to get people to the ground. And that's what it's all about. Isaiah Foskey, you come back, 14 sacks. Look, you know this, Ryan. It's just as important for him when he doesn't get the sack to create the pressure. Creating the pressure is just as important as it is getting the sack and getting the quarterback on the ground. That pressure might lead to an interception. So a lot of things go into this. They can't allow 135 yards per game. They can't allow 135 yards to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Oregon allowed 122 yards rushing total.
Yeah. Yep.
When they went up there and won last year. Notre Dame has to have they definitely have to have a similar output unless they go up big and they're playing off the ball to play the pass, and all of a sudden they're running draw plays and getting yards. And that's the only way they get yards like that. And I don't foresee it going that way, but I just really feel that this Notre Dame front seven and the depth they have at the linebacker position is going to show well, not just in Columbus, but for the rest of the season. So I'm actually encouraged. And the fact that they were 22nd in touchdowns, like you said, it's like, whoa, okay.
Yep.
All right. That's something to start with right there. But that goes to what we previously talked about. Rushing touchdowns, that's linked to red zone, man.
100%.
That's linked to your red zone defense. And Notre Dame, the numbers bear out that they were pretty good at both last year.
Yep. No, it's gonna be interesting to watch because I think that you mentioned Isaiah Foskey for a second there and Jason Adamalola. We've talked tremendously about like they need to be they are impactful in the run game because they create a lot of pressure and they create a lot of havoc in the backfield, but they need to finish plays more, right? Like you need to see, I'm not worried about the sack numbers as much as I'm worried about like, I want to see better tackle for loss numbers. I want to be more consistent in that area. I think the sacks will come, in my opinion, being better against the run and being able to make those tackle for loss numbers, those tackle for loss numbers. And it's going to be a challenge against Ohio State because Ohio State's offensive line wasn't great in 2021, but one thing they did, Sean, and this is credit to Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams and the running backs that they have, is they didn't give up a lot of negative yardage plays, right? Like it wasn't as good as it feel like it needed to be, but Ohio State has the ability to run the football. And I have kind of accepted in my mind that Notre Dame is going to give up some plays through the air because they are so talented, right? Like they have a great quarterback, they have great wide receivers. Absolutely. I think if Notre Dame wins the football game, they have to really limit the impact of Travion Henderson on the ground. That's like the X factor guy for me. Like that's the guy where if you come out of that game and you're like, we stopped Travion Henderson for, 90 yards, 100 yards, but it was a tough 100, then you feel pretty good about where you were, I think. I think that you feel like you may have had an opportunity to win that football game, right? So limiting the running game, I think, is going to be big for an offense that I think is going to have a bigger emphasis on it this year. And I think that they really need to, again, Travion Henderson's the guy that scares me. It's not Jackson Smith-Njigba, even though I know he's going to do really well and he's a great player. I know Marvin Harrison's extremely talented. A Met guy talked about being a big play guy. But for me, Travion Henderson's the guy that I am most worried about on this offense, if I'm being honest.
But I'm looking at these numbers, and you said it. I expected the numbers from a rushing standpoint to be better for Ohio State. But I'll say this. Ryan Day will hold Travion Henderson back. If he doesn't have early success in the run game, Ryan Day gets pass happy. Like we've seen it. We saw it against Penn State where they weren't effective in the running game and he just went pass happy. And Penn State had the secondary last year with Javon Brisker and all of those other guys. Their two defensive backs come back. I believe their two cornerbacks come back this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Was that Penn State?
Yeah.
Well, they have Joey Porter Jr. back at the one corner, and they have Jair Brown, I think, is the safety coming back. So they lost Brisker and they lost Tariq Castro Fields from last year, but good football players.
They were physical. The Porter Jr. is a big physical cornerback.
Sean, that boy is 6'3" with vines, man. Yes. He is a long kid, kid.
And they were able physically to hang with those receivers and eliminate the big plays. And the front seven shut the run game down. And I'll give them credit for this. When they got the ball back with 5 minutes, I think 6 minutes in the fourth quarter, and they had to run the ball to close that game, it was almost like Ryan Day was forced. Like, yo, we need to run the ball and close this game out. Like, we're only up 3 right now. Anything can happen. We need to run this clock and close this game out. That offensive line, Travion Henderson, they did exactly that, along with Mayan Williams. They closed it out. So I tip my cap to that because you have to have some gumption to be able to do that when teams know what you're trying to do and you do it. But I don't know. Ryan Day and his play calling might be key in this game, especially if their run game is stifled early. Like, does he panic? Does he lean on C.J. Stroud a little bit too much?
Yeah. If Ohio State gets pass happy, I think I'll be okay. I'll be okay. Again, Ohio State's going to make some plays. There's no doubt. But I'm much more worried about them getting the run game going. Because if you get the run game going, then the play action game is also going to be there for Ohio State and the passing game in general. Because then Notre Dame's going to have to put resources to stopping the run, an extra box defender, whether that is a safety or playing single high or whatever it is, man, playing a big nickel comparative to, maybe a true nickel at times. Like it's going to get dicey if Notre Dame's not able to stop the run. So we'll see. I know the last thing we want to cover, Sean, is obviously we talked about the running game, run stopping ability of Notre Dame and the rushing attack of Ohio State. The passing game comparison is very interesting. Notre Dame is another team that was not great against the pass in 2021 from a yards per game perspective, right? They gave up 224.2 yards per game, which was 63rd nationally. Yards per attempt wasn't bad, though. They gave up 30 yards per attempt. Top 10 nationally with only 13 touchdowns given up, which was surprising to me. That's a low number, man. I did not realize that Notre Dame was that low. They also intercepted 15 passes as a defense. Another good number. 25th in pass efficiency against, 120.59. So Notre Dame was a pretty efficient passing defense in 2021. Gave up a little bit of yards because, again, Notre Dame was beating some guys. I mean, they were 11-1 in the regular season. So there were some teams that were trying to come from behind and do all that type of stuff as well. Big number with sacks, Sean. Number 12th in the nation, 41 sacks for Notre Dame. So that's a really good numbers. But you're going against a passing offense with Ohio State, which is, I mean, it speaks for itself, right? Yards per game, third nationally, 380.9. Yards per attempt is 10 yards per attempt, which is just dumb. 14.2 yards per completion, which is also pretty dumb. 13th nationally. Threw 46 touchdowns. Of course, again, CJ Stroud, Heisman Trophy finalist last year, third nationally. Only threw 8 interceptions, which is another good number. So he was efficient while also being extremely productive in the passing game and having a high volume of attempts. Second in pass efficiency, 182.34, which, again, indicates that you are efficient, you're not turning the football over, and the sacks allowed. This is the one right here, Sean. 17 sacks allowed, which is 15th nationally. A very good number. A very good number. Notre Dame needs to get pressure on CJ Stroud. That's the first thing I look at is the strengths of the two teams last year was Notre Dame got some sacks and they got a lot of pressures. Ohio State did not give up a lot of sacks last year. One of those things have to give. And it doesn't have to give fully where Notre Dame has 6 sacks in this game, but they need to create pressure on CJ Stroud in the passing game. That is an emphasis on this game. If they're able to bother him, confuse him, speed up his process, I think Notre Dame is going to have some success in the passing game.
Goes back to what we just talked about, Double R. The pressures are just as important as the sacks, specifically in this game. You know, getting in his face, getting a push from the interior defensive line, make him move to the outside. He's not a guy that particularly likes to throw on the run, specifically going to the left. Force him that way. Make him throw against his body. Give yourself an opportunity to do what you've done last year, which is make interceptions, get big plays. And these numbers are without your best player for 6 games. Like your best player in the secondary wasn't there to contribute to these stats. And still you came up with 15 interceptions and you had the great touchdown performance being top 10. So the pass defense, even though most fans of Notre Dame and most national media came away from the Fiesta Bowl feeling like, oh boy, that pass defense in Notre Dame.
It's understandable, right? Because like we're watching Notre Dame every week. National is watching the big games, right? Yeah. And the last time they saw Notre Dame's secondary, Clarence Lewis included in that, it was not great. It wasn't great against Oklahoma State. But from a whole last season, it wasn't bad. Like there were some good moments for from Notre Dame as a pass defense last year.
And the biggest issue that we want to see is, can this secondary tackle? Right? That was the problem against USC late in that game. That was the problem against North Carolina against certain parts of that game. The linebacker core, the secondary, can they tackle? Can they make the plays? Heck, that same problem reared its ugly head in the Fiesta Bowl in the second half. You know, when you have Spencer Sanders sacked a couple of times, he gets out gets clutch third downs on 3rd and long. You can't have that happen. You should be on the sideline with the offense on the field. Now they're running more plays. You're getting more exhausted. And then you go into the 4th quarter and they end up doing what they do. This is why pressure, making the plays in the run game, tackles for loss, making the plays when they get an 8-yard pass, like you mentioned earlier. All of that is context for what you see before you from a stat standpoint. Because at some point, you're going to get an opportunity to pick CJ Stroud off. The opportunity is going to come, right? Because you fully expect Notre Dame with that front 7 to apply pressure, be in his face, and get some sacks. You expect that. You know, that's why all the hubbub has been about Isaiah Foskey, and I'll continue to say this. If Notre Dame can get double-digit sacks from Riley Mills, opposite him, now you're cooking with grease. Now teams can't just solely say, look, we're going to move our protections to the left. No, now you have to be disciplined, because when you looked at the stats offensively that we just talked about with their passing offense, and you compare that to what they do on the ground, which we were kind of shocked, like we thought their numbers would be better. Their yards per rush are really good. I think it was like 5.3. But no one really gets aggressive against them in their run game. Right? No one wants to everyone wants to keep both their safeties back against Ohio State. Right? Because of their ability to throw the ball. No one gets aggressive against their run. And I'm very interested at how Al Golden chooses his spots to be aggressive and run blitz, or to bring a safety down into the box, giving CJ Stroud a different look, because you know CJ Stroud is going to give the fake, and then he's going to look over to the sideline, and he's going to get the final play, and then they're going to go with it, right? So what tricks does Al Golden have up his sleeves with late movement in that defense, late movement in the secondary to give one look with the expectation of the play being changed, and then being aggressive? All of this, we're talking about everything which is going to make for a great game. I think that's what we're seeing. And these offensive numbers are just absolutely incredible, Ryan.
They're silly, aren't they? They're silly.
Right.
I know, man. They are. Notre Dame's playing a really good offense, man. There's no doubt about it. There is
but they're not invincible, though.
Sure.
They're not invincible, because at the end of the day, the game is the game. Like we said, they were walking in. I'm sure Utah felt like, yo, this is a really good offense that's coming out here to 80 degrees and full sunshine. And we don't have any of our defensive backs. But guess what? Let's punch them in the mouth. Let's make them play a game that they don't want to play and see if we have a chance. And they had a chance in the 4th quarter, and they just didn't execute. I mean, that's the way it is. I think Notre Dame's defense is better and going to be better than Utah's defense. I think Notre Dame's defense has a chance to really duplicate what Michigan did. I feel that way.
Yeah.
I feel like they can come out, shut down Travion Henderson, and force them to have to throw the ball. Jackson and Smith and Jigba had a huge day against Michigan. Huge day. But they lost the game.
Yeah. Well, that's where stats can be a little bit misleading. I mean, I saw the final stats of the CJ Stroud's game against Michigan, and I mean, Sean, like, he had a nice day from a box score perspective, but like you watched it, it was just like, it wasn't a great day. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a little misleading to it.
And you know this, Ryan. They can get all the stats they want. You just want to mess up their rhythm, because they're a rhythm offense. They're a rhythm offense. And if you get them off their rhythm, now they're not getting the points. They're getting the yards, but they're not getting the points. Right? Because they don't convert 2 or 3 third downs to continue that drive. That might lead to a field goal. That might lead to a touchdown, right? But they put up 50, 60 yards during that series, but it ended with a punt or it ended with a long field goal that was either made or missed. Like you said, the numbers can be misleading. You know, as a defense, goes back to your rubber band analogy. Just stand strong and stretch and eventually snap back when you get the opportunity to do so. But man, once again, 4,900 passing yards. Ryan, this is after they struggled to start the season.
Early in the season, yeah.
They struggled. And for them to, you know, I like what I see though, with us being 14th in interceptions and, you know, CJ being 28th, meaning we'll get the opportunities. I like that. Yep. I like that, especially with a ball hawk like Brandon Joseph back there. I like that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. I think turnover margin is going to be a big component of the football game for Notre Dame. I think that their ability to keep the football away is going to be a big component of the football game, right? But I really do like these stats that Brian was able to put together, though, Sean. And I know he wrote an article that kind of, you know, deduced a lot of the similar things. If you haven't checked that out, you should go to irishbreakdown.com. But that's going to kind of end this portion of the podcast. But please, no one now. Don't go anywhere, you that was thinking about clicking off of the screen. Do not do that because we have a mailbag that's coming up. Before we do that, though, you could like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast. If you are listening on one of your favorite podcast platform, please hit a 5-star review. Leave a nice note that Sean and Ryan are the best Irish Breakdown employees that Brian could ever ask for. We would genuinely appreciate it. We're going to get over to the mailbag. Have a lot of great questions already. If you haven't had a chance to ask a question, please put more in the chat. We have a lot of time to kind of work through a little bit of your questions, but this will end this for this section of the podcast. All right, Sean, let's get into the mailbag, my friend. We have some good questions we've been starring throughout the show. Want to ask if you can please continue to throw them in there. Want to get through a lot of these great ones. So first question, Sean, from Wade Garrett, a super chat. Shout out to you, Wade. Says, bet Notre Dame wins by the exact score of 41-40. I get a free IB t-shirt. If not, I donate double the amount of t-shirts to Irish Breakdown, IB Nation after the game. So, Wade, funny story. You put this one in before the show started, and Brian agreed to this, sir. He said, if Notre Dame wins 41-40, you get that exact score correct, he'll send you a free IB t-shirt. So that is all, my friends. If that exact score happens, Sean, you get some free IB gear, man. So
Wade must be hoping for overtime.
Right. Yeah.
I don't see that many points.
It's a lot of points, man.
That's a lot of points.
A lot of points. Yeah.
If it was 35-34, I would be like, okay. 41-40?
Yeah.
You might have to get to overtime and win that one.
Yeah, it's
we'll see though.
Yep. I'm sorry. I'm reading some of these comments that someone said Tyler Buckner's a horrible passer and stuff. It's just funny stuff, man. Funny stuff. But Wade, appreciate the super chat, and that bet is on, my friends. Free IB gear if you get that score correct. Gonna go, Sean, too. We are not Marshall. Good afternoon, IB Nation. Can someone riddle me this? How does OSU lose two first-round draft picks at wide receiver? That, of course, being Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And pundits believe their room will be better. I am no expert, but that is a stretch. Sean, I mean, for me, the reason I think that people believe this, and it's a fair point, but we're not Marshall. I would say this. I believe that, one, you have Jackson Smith-Njigba coming back, who's a great player, right? He was our leading receiver last year. And, I've been fully transparent that I think Garrett Wilson was the best Ohio State receiver last year, but Jackson Smith-Njigba was the number one producer. But they also have Marvin Harrison Jr., they have Emeka Egbuka, who are both very talented, who just haven't gotten a ton of volume at this point. But I think that the reason that they're so optimistic that it could be better is that they have Brian Hartline still, right? He's a great developer of talent, and they have a lot of talent to develop, right? So as long as Brian Hartline is the developer that he has been, there's no reason to think that this won't be a really talented receiver core. But I understand this, Sean. I understand his skepticism after losing 2 first-round picks that you think that your wide receivers are definitely going to be better. It definitely needs to be seen, but I do think they have a chance to be, again, an outstanding unit like they were last year.
Well, I'm sure they've had this question before when Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson showed up as youngsters.
Yeah.
And you see what they became. So,
yes, it did.
They have earned the right to be able to get this, benefit of the doubt. And that's all you can say. My whole thing is you still have to go play. And I would much rather catch their guys early, making their first starts, still going through and just maybe they make a mistake here or there that ends up being a big play rather than them being in their groove in week 5 or 6. And it's like, okay. Like the offense is really humming. So, but yeah.
Right. Yep. I mean, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? They have Brian Hartline. They have a lot of talent. So there's no reason to think that they won't reload, not rebuild, reload it. So we have a next question from Leighton Borkholder. Question: how much motivation, if any, does Notre Dame players and coaches get from the utter lack of disrespect from the media for them for the Ohio State game? You want to start off on that, Sean? How much do you think that the Notre Dame team, the players specifically, are feeding in or using that disrespect as motivation in this game leading up to it?
Notre Dame knows who Ohio State is. They know the opportunity, and they've been laser focused all off season on the opportunity. But Saturday's about the opportunity for them as a program. It's not about Ohio State. It's for them. And I think based upon what the players said yesterday, they believe if they play their game, they're going to win. It's not about Ohio State. It doesn't matter if the game is in Ohio, if it was in Indiana, or any other place in the country. Notre Dame and its players believe, and its coaches, that if they play their game, they're going to win the game. It's as simple as that. So the disrespect and all the outside noise and the 17.5 coming from Vegas and the national media, that's just, the fire's already burning. That's just extra wood. Like we bring our own wood to our own fires. That's Notre Dame. But if you want to throw some more logs in there, go ahead. The fire is still going. So, of course they see it, they hear it, but I don't think it's at the center of the motivation for this game, for the program.
I've said something similar to this before, Sean. If Notre Dame players need poster board material to get up for Ohio State week 1 in the shoe, then there's an issue there to begin with, right? How could you not be just jumping out of your skin to try to play this football game, man?
Yeah.
That has to be the first and foremost. But to your point, when a fire's going, if you want to keep throwing stuff on, man, the fire's going to keep getting bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? So Notre Dame players, coaches, I know people were talking about the Marcus Freeman pretending like he didn't know and it was a joke, that pretending he didn't know the spread the other day or whatever of the game. He was like, 17.5, didn't know that. Yeah, okay. All right. Marcus Freeman didn't know what the spread was, right? Yeah. All these guys understand what's being said about them, and they 100% internally will use that as an added boost. But I don't think it's the main driver, is my point, right? The main driver is that they have been working for months and months for Ohio State. Mm-hmm. You always talk about we're just, we're not worried about the first game yet. We're just trying to, be the best version of ourselves, yada, 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 coach talk, right? They've been ready for this game. They've been juiced up. So you have to, if you're not excited for this game, if you're a Notre Dame player, then you're not alive right now. You need to be up and ready. That needs to be internally driven. But some added motivation never hurt anybody. So, all right, we're going to go to next question from Salty Virginia Peanuts. I just had to put this one because it's really funny. Is Brian Driscoll starting to do too many speaking gigs, kissing babies, and golf outings? Reminds us of another person in authority as recently as the end of last season. Oh man, I'm going to tell Brian Salty that you compared him to Brian Kelly, which is going to be a great conversation to have. But hey, Brian Driscoll, the man never stops working, right? Sean, he called me before he left. He's like, oh, you might need to help, you might need to help a little bit more in the back end if you can, blah, blah, blah. And along the way, man, he's been like, checking in with me, making sure everything's good, all that type of stuff. And I'm like, I got you, man. I got you, and I know he trusts me, obviously, but like the man never stops working, man. So he deserves a little time, Salty, to kiss some babies and, do all that type of stuff, man. If he wants to go golfing, Brian Driscoll should go golfing. He's earned it. He's earned it at this point.
He really doesn't like golfing though. So.
Oh, he doesn't? I didn't know that.
No,
yeah, so.
no.
Well, you go to the gun range then if you'd rather.
The other range, yeah.
The
other range.
Yeah. If he wants to go to the gun range instead, he deserves it at this point. I want to bring this one up, which I thought was an interesting comment at the end there, Sean.
Okay.
David Carpenter said, I really believe that the best defense will be a good Tyler Buckner, TB12 Tyler Buckner offense. I agree, David. I think that will be a big component of this football game, right? Because I think that the dual threat potential and the ability to extension of the run game will be huge. And if Tyler Buckner is good in this game and Notre Dame's able to stay on the field and have some good drives, then you're limiting the impact that CJ Stroud and the rest of the Ohio State offensive players can have if they're not on the field, right? So I agree with you. I think that would be a big layer, but don't mistake that for the fact that Notre Dame still needs to play well on defense. Like they need to play well in that regard, but I agree that if Tyler Buckner is able to play well and that defense is humming, then it's going to give you a much better chance to win the football game. There's no doubt about it.
I am of the mindset, well, I'll take Tyler Buckner at his word. I don't know if he was trying to push back because the media asked him about that, controlling the clock. And his response was really along the lines like, yeah, at the right time, that's something that we're going to do. But that's not what we're coming in to do.
Right.
We're going to be able to do a lot of different things. And at some point, it's going to be very important, right? That they control the clock, run the ball, and keep offenses like Ohio State's on the sideline. They'll have that opportunity during the game against Clemson, and more than that, when they face USC, that'll be a challenge for them as well. But no, I'll push back and say I'll take my chances with. I have no problem with Marcus Freeman saying he would defer if he wins the coin toss.
He's a defensive guy, man. Yeah. He's a defensive guy. What do you want to say?
I'm right there with him. Please put our defense on the field first. I have no problem. Let's go. Like we already know Ohio State has a good offense, but you know what? Step on the field and play.
Yep. It's going to be interesting, man. Great question so far, by the way, folks. Wanted to put this one up because, again, just want to reiterate this from Base and Domer. Base and Domer. Did I hear that right? Coach D is out golfing. No, I did not say that. I'm saying if he wants to golf, he should feel the free to do so because he works so hard. I was complimenting.
I'll take that bet 100% saying no. There's no way he's out golfing.
Yes.
I don't care if you put him in the middle of the resort with nothing else, a bag and a bag of balls, he still would not touch anything remotely close to golf.
You know what's funny is me and my wife might go mini golfing tonight, so it's pretty ironic. It's pretty funny, really? But yeah. Oh yeah, man. I got to do a little bit of a date night once in a while. Got to be the good husband type of thing. So but yeah. Golfing's not really my thing either, though. Although I do like going to. I don't know if they're out there where you are, Sean, but there's this thing called what's it called? It's like this Top Golf. Is there any Top Golfs out near you?
Yeah. We have 3 of them in the area. Yeah.
That's fun, man, because there's like different games. And like I have a pretty good drive, so like I like to just drive the ball a little bit, but like they have the games, they have alcohol, they have food. It's a nice environment, man. I like some Top Golf. It's pretty fun.
The food is really good.
Yeah. Dude, the food is so good. I couldn't believe it. I got some tacos from there It was just like some carne asada tacos, I think, and it was so good. I was like, "What the heck? Am I at a golfing place right now?" It tastes like it's really good, man. But yeah,
it's not like the golf carts on the course. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, it's good, man. I would go back there just to eat. I don't even need to golf. Like I could go back there and just eat. This one's a fun question. Zachary said, "You think your wife will win tonight?" Absolutely not, Zachary. You silly man. You silly person. Come on now. All due respect, but I'm pretty competitive, and my wife knows the deal. All right, I don't play sports anymore, Zachary. So like, I gotta win where I can get my wins. You know what I'm saying? So
your outlet, you have to win.
Yeah. I think we have someone that wanted to know about where you live, Sean. They asked, Sean, do you live in Indiana? Because I know that you come to a lot of the home games, obviously. So
yeah, I come to the home games and I come down, to cover and look at practices and do as much as I can. Heck no. Mm-hmm. I'm Chicago South Side, born and raised, man.
And I am going to be in Chicago from the Friday before the Marshall game until Sunday. So I've already told Sean that we need to meet up at some point when I'm out there. And he'll, I'm sure, be going to the Marshall game, which is the first home game. So
absolutely
gotta spend some time. Archer asked, talking about my date night. Now we're getting off the rails here. Ryan, are you seriously not seeing Top Gun on your date night? I think those super chats might get revoked. Archer, I promise you, sir. I promise this chat, and I'm a man of my word, okay? I will see this movie. I promise you, okay? It will be seen. I promise. Take it to the bank that I will see this movie, but probably not tonight. But it will be seen, okay? Before you see me, Archer, if you come, you should come out because I know you're a closet Notre Dame fan. We've been over this, right? You should come out to the Marshall game, and then we can talk about it at the tailgate, all right? But, if you want to.
Man, they're on you, bro. You better watch.
They are, man. Hey, I'm going to see the movie, Sean. I promise. I keep promising these folk that I'm going to see it, but they just don't believe me. Going to go to Sports Cool 77. Do you see Matt Salerno having a chance to become like a Chris Fink this year, a former walk-on that becomes a major contributor to the offense? We've talked about this one a little bit. Sean, I don't know if you've ever had this conversation with us on the podcast before, but I think some people underrate just because Chris Fink was a walk-on that, like, he was a pretty good athlete, like he had a 40-inch vert coming out. He was a 4.5 something kid, like 4.57 in the 40. Like, he's a pretty athletic kid, man. I just think that I'm just not sure that Matt Salerno is the same type of athlete as a Chris Fink. Like, I'm just not sure, but give Matt Salerno credit. Earned a scholarship. He's on the 3 deep going into the game. Like, there's, we'll see if he can contribute in capacity, but like, I don't think that he's going to be Chris Fink. I don't.
I think if he took out the word major contributor, because I don't know if Chris Fink was even a major contributor. He was a contributor. I don't know if I would consider him a major. I love Chris. I just talked to him this past weekend. Unfortunately, he was just cut by the Bears. He didn't make the 53 roster, but he's out there grinding, man. He's out there grinding. He's still trying to live out his NFL dreams. He's a really good dude. And like you said, Matt Salerno and him athletically might not be the same. But, I mean, Matt Salerno has been the guy. He's been the guy leading the charge of fair catch you on special teams. So
fair catch you.
That lets you know he has good hands. He has really good hands.
Sure.
He has good hands.
Yeah, you have to, man. If you're going to fair catch the football, you got to have good hands. So I agree. But just don't see the same type of impact. But we're going to go to Rob Tidoff here, who said, I do not want to seem negative, guys. This is a statement, but I just do not see our offense keeping up with OSU's offense on the road and for the first game. But in time, yes. Rob, I completely get that one. I was on a different podcast earlier. It was an Ohio State-centric podcast. And I said, like, Notre Dame doesn't want to get into a shootout with Ohio State, right? Like, they have to play good defense and they have to play a little bit of keep away, in my opinion, right? Like, those are kind of recipes for success. But that being said, I agree with you that I mean, if the game goes into the 40s, then I don't like Notre Dame's chances. I don't. But if it stays in the, if you hold Ohio State to 31, 34, somewhere in that ballpark, I think you can win the football game, right? Like, I think you can. But if it starts getting into the 40s, like a true shootout, then sure. I don't think Notre Dame's offense is going to keep up either because I don't want to get in a shootout with CJ Stroud and that company. Like that's going to be that's not a recipe for success, in my opinion, Sean. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I mean, I don't think anybody sees that. I don't think, but we've seen crazy things in college football, right? A great game is a great game, right? I didn't expect, even though it took overtime for both teams to get into the 40s, I really didn't expect Clemson and Notre Dame to have that many points, 2 years ago, but it did,
right.
And, because I didn't think Ian Book was going to be able to put up 33 in regulation against that defense, but he did. So we've seen weird things happen. But most of us believe that it's going to be the Notre Dame defense and offensive line that sets the tone, keeps the score down, and ultimately makes the plays in the fourth quarter. So, yeah.
Sorry, Sean. I got sidetracked because some people are they're guessing what Brian is doing right now. So hot take: Brian is at a ballroom dancing conference. We had in there. We are not Marshall say Brian is carrying Brian Kelly's golf clubs to the next hole.
Please, somebody make that picture. Please.
Oh man.
Internet, if you can make that happen.
Yes.
If
yes,
you find
please.
a picture of Brian Kelly with a caddy, just put Brian Driscoll's face on it and send it to us.
Y'all are the best, man. These are some great comments. I'm really enjoying this. We should keep putting it in the chat. What do you think Brian Driscoll is doing right now? I want to see the expectations here and the projections. Let's go to this one, Sean. We got a super chat from Chris S. Chris, thank you so much. Said, to be honest, Chris Fink could have started at other schools when he played. Not so sure about with Salerno, unfortunately. Great stream, guys. Appreciate the ladder there, Chris, for the stream part. Thank you so much. I'll say this. I agree with you 100%. I think Chris Fink, there's some schools he wouldn't have, but there is definitely a lot of Power 5 schools that I think Chris Fink would have played football for and would have played a significant role for. So I agree completely. It is a situation where I think you got to steal with Chris Fink as a former walk-on, right? Like Chris Fink was a good football player. Like, let's call it what it was, man. He was a good, solid football player. So I agree with this one. All right, we got the we got some more, Sean. I got to put some of these up. I think he's doing some low-end slow barbecue and watching Rudy. Archer said Brian is finishing up his TPS report for the end of the month. Yeah. We had 99 problems. Driscoll's answering the letters Lou Holtz had sent to BK. Did you see that? Did you see that on the McAfee show? That's awesome.
Great. That's great.
Oh man, yeah, that was a funny little video, man, of the Lou Holtz impression and stuff, which was pretty fantastic on the Pat McAfee show. If anybody did not see that, but appreciate you all, man. You're funny. You all are funny. We had Zachary Lane. I just wanted to comment to this, Sean, because he put it in. I think I commented it during the breakdown, but Zachary Lane said it took 3 years for Oklahoma State players to get to know the Jim Knowles defense down. Yes, again, it's a different situation, though. I expect it to be a little more simplistic this time because I think Jim Knowles is a smart enough guy to understand that he's got more talent than he had originally at Oklahoma State. So just a quick take there. Timeout Tom. Again, I want to just talk about this one. I think I may have at one point, but he said, what does last year's numbers have to do with predicting Saturday's game? That's the starting point, right? That's the baseline. That's where Notre Dame has evaluation periods happen every offseason, Sean. So after the season, Notre Dame sat down and said, where were we good last year? Where were we bad last year? And how do we have to improve? And I think and honestly, Ohio State was watching the film of Notre Dame last year. Is like, we could take advantage of that, or they do that really well. So it's a starting point for me, right? Like that's what they know about these teams as of right now, outside of what the depth chart says. So just tangible understanding to begin the season.
And to go ahead and just add to what you just said, for the coordinators have DNA.
Mm-hmm.
They have DNA of what they choose to go to situationally, certain parts of the field, and that helps you to anticipate as a coordinator and to adjust as a coordinator to know this is what he likes to do, this is what he likes to call, regardless of the talent. This is what he likes to call in these types of situations. And so there's no bad thing that can come from looking at numbers and, watching film of a previous season. they do tell a story. They might not tell the whole story, but they do tell a story.
This is the funniest comment of the day from Stymie Snurdly. Brian is picking up tailgate supplies from the family. Oh, man. It's too funny. It's too funny, sir. Thank you so much for that comment. That was fantastic. Sean, here's a question. Ready? So, for Ryan Loftus, does Notre Dame take a Michigan approach or a Utah approach to take on Ohio State?
I mean, I don't really think it's a Michigan or Utah approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to be fair, if you call it a Michigan approach and a Utah approach, then you have to say it's a Minnesota approach. Because it was Minnesota in game 1 against Ohio State that really showed this is the way you beat them.
Muhammad Ibrahim. Yeah.
If Ibrahim doesn't get hurt, who knows how that game turns out? Because he was on a roll and well on his way to like putting up a 200-yard performance on the ground in that game before the injury. So it's really about styles. Styles make fights and they make football games. And it's the reason why Notre Dame is able to play Georgia close and not able to play Alabama as close. Because Alabama is a physical team, but Alabama at the skill positions are just another level. And at the quarterback position have been another level up from Georgia. Georgia, like Kirby Smart, he coaches close to the vest, doesn't take a lot of chances, physical. And that's the type of game that Notre Dame, hey, we do the same thing. Brian Kelly coaches the same way. So those Georgia matchups were a little bit closer. So it's about matchups and styles. And I just think Utah is a bad matchup for what Ohio State wants to do. Michigan last year, bad matchup for what they wanted to do. I think Michigan last year would have been as much as I think Notre Dame is better as a program than Michigan, I would not have liked to see those two defensive ends going against that Notre Dame offensive line last year during the season. It just would have been a bad matchup. I mean, the game would have been close, but it would have been a bad matchup. And I think this is a matchup where you have to like what Notre Dame has in the trenches to be able to stay close. So I think it's about the style of play that Notre Dame can walk into the horseshoe and play. I wouldn't attribute it to one team because I saw several teams, employ the same style last year and be successful. Penn State was successful doing the same thing against Ohio State. So
I would say this, Sean, whenever you emulate people, you take or to emulate something in general, you take the good from it that you like, and then you don't take the bad, right? So I don't think it's emulating one team. I think it's taking tidbits from a team that made them successful in a particular matchup, right? To your point. So Sean, we're friends, right?
Of course.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put up a couple comments and you have to read it now for me. Ready?
Sure. Brian is in Baton Rouge trying to get Brian Polian's autograph. He would rather get Brian Kelly's autograph than Brian Polian. from knowing my guy as well as I do. That's hilarious though. I'm sorry. Thank you for that Beef Eater ND08, aka Toe Jam 1992.
And the last one, Toe Jam. Appreciate that one. Last one I need you to read from Salty Virginia Peanuts.
Brian is pushing the finishing touches on his forward for the book Brian Kelly, Notre Dame's winning this.
Maybe he's gonna be a ghostwriter. That's fantastic. Thank you all for having so much fun with us in the chat. This is fantastic. We only have a few questions left here. Thank you again so much for these fantastic questions. Absolutely fantastic. Ryan Loftus, I think I hit this one. Didn't I? Yeah, I did hit that one.
You did.
So we're gonna go to Kyle Wade. Question: what's your preferred running stats and time of possession for Notre Dame to feel good about victory? Yards per catch, rushing touchdowns, etc. Wow. So this is a loaded question. I guess let's start with: Sean, is there a rushing number that you think Notre Dame needs to hit for it to be what you would consider a successful day on the ground? Not necessarily a difference between winning and losing, but is there a number that you think they need to hit near?
Heck yeah. I'll
Okay.
take 5 rushing touchdowns.
Well, sure, I would too. Yeah.
If I see 5 rushing touchdowns in the stats the next day, I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I think we won that matchup. I think we won.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a nice number. Is there a yardage number though? You think like does Notre Dame have to get to 200? Do they have to get to 180? Like what is because I've been around like the 175, 180 range. Like I think they need to get to that number because I think that could be considered a successful day to a degree. But yeah.
I'm gonna say rushing. I would like to see 250.
That's a great day. 250 is a great day.
250 yards per carry, right at 5.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like what 50, 45 to 50 carries, 45 to 50 rushing attempts, which means Tyler probably gets 30 attempts through the air, 30 to 35. And if Tyler can put up 225 to 250 with a couple of touchdowns, no turnovers, no interceptions, no fumbles. Yeah. 250 combined coming from 4 guys. I mean, that's doable. Like, because everybody's going to get a touch.
Yeah.
Diggs, Austin May, Tyree, Tyler, they're all going to get a chance to run the rock. So, it's
a good number. I think I'm thinking if Notre Dame gets to 2 bills, I think that's a really good number. But again, I think they can win a football game if it's 175 to 180 against Ohio State. It's just going to have to look a little differently than if they ran for 250, for instance, right? Like it's going to look a little different. But time of possession, this is a big indicator of success for me. Big indicator. When we broke down kind of last year, Notre Dame was pretty 50-50 time of possession wise. Like they kind of won like half the battle. I think they have to win this pretty convincing, like a 60-40 affair, 60% of the time of possession go to Notre Dame. Like you have to hold the ball and limited amount of possessions. Because even when you limit the amount of possessions with Ohio State, they're still going to score, right? Like they're still going to have their moments. They're still going to put up yardage. They're still going to do their stuff, but you have to have the ball more than Ohio State has. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Yards per carry, rushing touchdowns. Sean kind of hit on most of those, so we'll move on after that one, but appreciate it. We had another super chat from Ryan Loftus. Appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you so much. Who do you think would win in arm wrestling, Sean or Brian? Sean, we're friends. I already put that out there, but I have to pick Brian because he's my leader and he pays my check, man. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
You can say whatever you want here, though, because you're defending your honor in this situation. But
just don't make it 17.5. That's all. That's all.
Fair.
I want you to cherish your money. Don't take that bet. I don't even know what the bet would be. What the amount of time for arm wrestling that you win in or something like that?
I think it's just who wins thing, right? Like, yeah. All right, we got this question from Kyle Wade. Oh, we just did that one. Come on, Ryan. Talking to myself, by the way. Ian Johnston, does fall camp change your opinion on how Notre Dame receivers would handle press and how the team would handle a quick tempo like Oklahoma State used? I mean, it has to, Sean. It has to change your opinion on the press coverage, right? With what Chancey Stuckey's done.
Yeah, they got release packages now. That's what Braden Lindsey says. But just from the work, all things being considered from spring to fall, the work that Chancey Stuckey and the impact he's made on the guys in the wide receiver room, you have to feel better. You have to feel better about them being prepared. And the quick tempo, the quick tempo thing is exaggerated in my opinion, right? The last 2 years, Notre Dame was a bad tackling defense. That's fundamentals. That has nothing to do with quick tempo. That just has you're there to make the play, make the play. And if Notre Dame tackles better, all of that quick tempo stuff will go away. It just will.
Yeah. I mean, so that stuff, again, it's the last thing we saw, right, in Oklahoma State. So like that's the thing. It's the recency bias, right? Like that's the last thing you saw.
It was the last thing you saw, but when you saw USC and North Carolina go up tempo,
yeah,
you start to see some of those things that Oklahoma State probably saw on film in preparation and said to themselves, we can take advantage of this. So, and that's what they did all year was go up tempo.
Yep. And you're going against Ohio State team that they're not like the fastest tempo team of all time, but like they'll play with some tempo. They'll play with urgency. They will. They'll get up to the line and they'll do their thing. I'll say this press coverage, I feel a lot better about just seeing Coach Stuckey in one practice. Honestly, like it's an attention to detail thing, right? Like they have a release package now. They have the finer details of playing the wide receiver position. I think that's why I have high hope for how much better the wide receivers can be this season. So we have a question from Zach Martin. This one's an NFL draft centric question, which I'm always going to take. Ryan, does Michael Vincent have any shot at the NFL? If so, Notre Dame would break the tie with Oklahoma State for 3 NFL long snappers. If so, LSU, baby. Huh. Oh, long snapper you, baby. I read that terribly wrong. I'm sorry, Zach. Long snapper you, maybe. Hey. So to answer the question directly, I don't evaluate specialists, but I will say this. I reached out to someone about a week and a half ago for consulting stuff to ask a little bit about some specialists that they projected for the draft. And he actually did have Michael Vincent rated as one of his top long snappers for next year. So I don't know the NFL background as far as like what the NFL thinks about Michael Vincent. And you won't know that for a long time because long snappers aren't of huge importance, Zach, at this time of the year from a NFL draft perspective. But apparently he's on the radar. So we'll see. If it's long snapper you, it's another thing to add to the resume. So I like
that would be a documentary I would watch.
Long snapper you?
on the 30 guys in the NFL.
I'll say this. So I've done a lot of NFL draft interviews in the past, Sean, like a lot of podcast interviews. And the best interviews I've ever had are specialists. They're so funny, man. They're weird. And I mean that in a positive way. I'm not saying like weird, like I don't want to be around you. I'm saying like weird, like their mind goes in very strange ways. Yeah. Right. But like, yeah, man, I'm down with some specialists. I mean, I remember I talked to a kicker that wanted to be like went for like aerospace engineering and liked to play chess, but then also he like was the funniest guy on the team. And like, they're bizarre, man. But like, I love some specialists. So I agree. They should get a specialist camp and just like watch what happens. Yeah. Like, yeah, I would love that. So we got 99 problems, but BK ain't one. Question: what's going on with Ryan Barnes? He isn't in the 2 deep for the Ohio State game. So Sean, I'll highlight this a little bit and then let me see what your just kind of thoughts are on it. So Ryan Barnes at one point this fall was practicing a little bit with the safeties as well. So he was cross-training between cornerback and safety. 99 problems, to be completely honest, it sounds like he wasn't able to beat a couple guys out, if I'm being completely honest. So it sounds like right now he is being utilized more for his ability to play multiple positions and as a depth piece right now. So, I mean, I think it's unfortunate, but it's not an end-all be-all, right? Like he has many games. He has 12 football games to try to showcase his talent and to climb the depth chart. But as of right now, it looks like he will not be a main contributor at cornerback for Notre Dame in opening week.
Yep, I totally agree. And I think that was pushed to the forefront because of the emergence of the young freshman at the position and Xavier Watts being moved. Also added a little urgency to that, the cross-training. Yes. It's just, it is what it is, man. You have guys coming in that can play, and all of a sudden the depth chart has changed, and guys have to find new positions and a new way to get on the field. So it doesn't mean anything about them as a player. It's just okay.
It may say more about the guys in the room than Ryan Barnes in this. It may. I'm not saying that it definitely is. I'm not saying that Ryan has had a bad spring or a great fall or a bad fall. Like I'm not 100% sure on how he's trended here.
Yeah.
But to Sean's point, where I think you were kind of going, Sean, is that like Jaden Mickey's played good football in this fall, right? And Benjamin Morrison has played good football, and Clarence Lewis has played good football. Like these guys aren't playing bad ball, which I think it just says more about the people around him than maybe it does about him. But again, he's only a sophomore, so he has time, right? Like this isn't end of Ryan Barnes at Notre Dame. It was a big opportunity, but it doesn't mean it's the last opportunity. So we'll see. Want to pull up Tom M real quick, who just said, "Go Irish" from Thailand. Tom, thank you so much for being with us. Excited for the game in a couple of days, sir. And wanted to pull up 99 Problems just had a thing that he wanted to say here to kind of reiterate on it. So he said, from a physical and talent profile, Barnes seems like he could be an interesting safety prospect. I don't disagree with that at all. We'll see what happens with it, if it's just purely a cross-training thing or if it's eventually his long-term position, but he brings length, brings athleticism. I mean, yeah, I think there is an interesting profile there as a safety. Because he has some physical profile to him as a tackler too, Sean. Like, I think that's the big thing. Is like he does have an interesting profile, I would say.
He does, and the opportunity just numbers-wise at that position will be there because they're going to lose a lot next year at safety. They're going to lose a lot. So there's going to be opportunity there, but the same breath, there's a guy coming in from Texas that's a day one starter, in my opinion. So yes, it's going to be
he's pretty good, man. He's pretty good. Decent football player. Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad. Wanted to pull up this one from Tommy. Oh, Ryan, I sent you NCAA 14 simulation of game. Have you been able to check it out yet? Tommy, was that in DM? Because I did not see it if you sent it to me. If so, though, I will go check it out. Was that a DM on Twitter or was that on the message board? Just let me know. All right. Here's a question from Beefeater ND08, aka Toe Jam 1992. So from Toe Jam. Serious question. Sean, we'll start with you on this one. Serious question. How many touches does Audric Estime get on Saturday?
12 to 15.
12 to 15? Okay.
Yeah, 12 to 15.
Do you consider him? So, Sean, I think that the more carries he has, the more indicative of how successful a game you had. Well, not from offensive perspective, just a outcome perspective. Because I think that he's a closer, right? Like he's the guy down the stretch of a game. So if Audric has close to 17, 18 touches, that probably means that you were probably winning the football game, right? Because that means that you were giving it to him down the stretch. I don't know if you agree with that or not. But
no, you start out at 15, and Tommy Rees is going to start out with, get this guy in there for this amount of plays, this guy, and then the flow of the game will dictate, and performance will dictate more. So we can sit here and say, oh, he's going to get 15, but like you just said, the type of back he is, if the game flows a certain way, you might bump that up to 20. He might end up with 20 touches. If it's a physical game, and they're trying to salt the game away in the fourth quarter, he might be that guy that runs the ball 6 to 7 times on one drive in the fourth quarter to take him from 13 touches up to 19. So, but I'll stick with 15.
It's a good number. It's going to be interesting. Again, I think it could be very indicative of the outcome, depending on how many touches he does have. So Tom just had another point. Ryan can't wait to have a few Notre Dame fans going to watch the game here in Thailand, 6:30 a.m. on Sunday. Go Irish. Absolutely, Tom. I hope you enjoy the game. I hope it's a good outcome for you for an early game, but we'll see. We had a similar question from Thistlemore Pottery. Sean says, how many catches and touchdowns does Mayer have on Saturday? We need him to be big. You have a number on that one?
He can have as many catches and touchdowns as he wants.
Is that good?
Whatever he wants to do on the football field Saturday, he can do it. If he wants 3 touchdowns, he can get it. But no, I'll give just based upon the average that he had last year, Micah Mayer was really like a 7-catch, 90-yard, 2-touchdown guy.
Yeah.
So I'll stick with the averages. I'll say 8 catches for 97 for 2 touchdowns.
Hey, man. Love to hear. I think that Notre Dame does. We haven't talked about Michael Mayer a ton because he's just such a known commodity, right? But
Yeah.
he does have an advantage on Saturday. Like those linebackers working against Mayer, it's an advantage. Him working against, even the safeties, I think that he has obviously a big size advantage, whether he's working against Proctor or Hickman. So I think he has to be a big player. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I had a guy tell me today on, when I was co-hosting that Michael Mayer is the second best tight end in the country. And I was like, oh, okay. You still can't stop him. I was like, that doesn't change Saturday at
Isn't
all.
that so silly, man? It's like, oh, he's only the second best tight end in the country. Okay.
Okay.
He's bad, apparently, if he's the second best tight end in the country, which is pretty funny. It's hysterical. We had C-Mac that predicted 22 carries for 150 for Audric. Well, let's hope, man. Let's hope. Hey, I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it.
By all means, from your mouth to the college football gods.
Make it happen, man.
Yeah.
Rob Tidoff, Ryan, and Sean. We only have a few questions here left. Great questions again. As always, win or lose Saturday, what is one thing we cannot see from Notre Dame during the game that could affect the future of the program? That's interesting. I mean, it's an obvious one, right? This is going to sound like, again, Notre Dame needs to win this football game, but you can't get blown out, man. You got to have some life. That's been the biggest thing about Notre Dame program recently is in the big games, they melt, right? They don't show up. Notre Dame needs to show up. They need to score points. They need to show up. Even if it's again, Notre Dame needs to win, but even if it's a close loss, at least I can leave that and be okay, at least things are moving in the right direction. Watching Notre Dame against the big guys in college football over the last few years has been disheartening, Sean. It has been at times, It's you go into an game against Alabama, you just don't have much hope. If we're being completely honest, you're going against Clemson. I mean, you beat Clemson one time without Trevor Lawrence and without Tyler Davis, without Mike Jones, and then you play him against Trevor Lawrence, and you're just not a match for it, right? And so I think it's just easy for me, Rob. You need to come and play, man. You need to compete. That's the biggest thing. Is competition is the biggest thing that I need to see on Saturday.
And I'll be more nuanced. Totally agree with what Ryan said. I'll be more nuanced, especially as far as impact recruiting. It's two things that Notre Dame needs to show, and that's that they can develop quarterbacks and wide receivers. And I need Tyler Buckner to show that he's better than last year. I need to see that. I need to see that he's been developed. And I need to see these wide receivers have been developed and that they're better than they were previously. We understand that, the coaching and everything, but I need the wide receivers to make plays. And no, I'm not including Michael Mayer in that.
Right.
We have no problems with tight ends at Notre Dame. I need the wide receivers to show things have changed. Those are the two things that I need to see.
100%. We had a comment here from 99 Problems. Just wanted to pull up Sean. He said, Smith and Jigba might only be the second best receiver in the country after Boutte at LSU. So I guess Notre Dame doesn't have to worry about him anymore. Yes. Yep. I'll call Jackson Smith and Jigba and be like, hey, you might only be the second best receiver in college football. So Notre Dame doesn't have to worry about you this weekend. Yes. Very good.
That was the craziest thing I'd ever heard.
Right. All right. We had Rob again. He had a question. Ryan and Sean, will you be in Columbus Saturday? If you are, come out to Dempsey's Food and Spirits. This is where the Notre Dame club meets for every game. Rob, unfortunately, I will not be in Columbus. Sean, will you be in Columbus?
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Uh-oh.
That's why we're collecting bail money.
Oh, yeah. Very good point. Very good point. Sean might not have to make an appearance at Dempsey's then, man. Get some food. Yeah. Rob, food's on you, right? I think.
I hope they have good food, man.
Yeah, I've never even been to Columbus before, so
I don't like going to campuses that don't have good food. But I will say this: I never visited Columbus when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the campuses I didn't get to, so I can't speak to how the food is around campus. But let me tell you something, man. The Big Ten has some great places to visit for college football games.
I actually heard Iowa's pretty nice. Have you been to Iowa, Sean?
Iowa City sports, a lot of people from Chicago, the Chicago area and the St. Louis area.
Mhm.
So, it is a lot of people from Chicago like Iowa.
Gotcha.
They really do.
Gotcha.
It's everything is condensed. Like everything to do is really close to campus and really close to the football stadium. And like if you get like 5 miles away from that, it starts to get a little sparse. But in that area, it's very much poppy, as they say.
So I actually have been to the city of Columbus. I've just never been on the Ohio State campus.
Yeah.
My wife loves the Columbus Zoo out there. It is a fantastic zoo. We took the baby this summer there.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, there was the most, I can't remember what it was called. I need to text my buddy Corey that lives out there, but they had the most delicious, it was like a little diner spot, but it was like hangover diner-ish food. But it was, they had these breakfast tacos, man, that were like these spicy breakfast tacos were one of the best meals I've ever had. So I need to try to get back to that place at some point. But, and Buckeyes. You like Buckeyes? Chocolate peanut butter?
You know what? I've never had them. I've always heard great things about them.
Yeah, it's good, man. It's good. It's
I'd
rather have a Reese cup, but like it's good. Yeah, it's good though.
I love Reese's. So, man, have you tried that Reese's ice cream at Baskin Robbins?
Nope. No, I have not. It's good. Is it good? Does it got chocolate chunks in there? What's it got? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything.
All right.
Yep.
I dig it, man. I dig it. Looks like we got one more question, and then we'll get out of here with a comment. Archer said, which outcome has bigger impact on Notre Dame as a program? This is an interesting one, Sean. I'll let you go first here. Which outcome has bigger impact on Notre Dame as a program? Them going 12-0 or them going 8-4 this year?
Well, there's only one answer because the other one isn't going to happen, and that's 12-0. There's no way Notre Dame's going 8-4. But I mean, yeah, 12-0 would be tremendous. But even more than that, 12-0, because 12-0 will put them in the championship game.
Yep.
Or does that put them in the playoffs? Wait a minute. 12-0 will put them in the championship game, right?
We'll put them in the playoffs.
It will put them in the playoffs?
Yeah.
No. Yep. Look, that 12-0 to me, I can't speak for anybody else. That 12-0 to me would be like, all right, I need a win in this playoff.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I need.
But you did beat. But if you went 12-0, you would have beaten Ohio State and Clemson to get there, though. So that's.
And what that means is, no, this is the thing. This is what stinks, right? You beat Ohio State and Clemson, and they still probably run the table in their conferences and get to the playoff. And you face one of them again.
I wouldn't count either one of them out.
Yeah, so I would love to see that. But, I mean, if you beat Ohio State week 1 and then face them again in the playoff, I feel confident.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything for me, Sean. I've been talking about it this whole offseason. You have a lot of momentum with the program right now, right? Yeah. Everyone's excited about Marcus Freeman. You're recruiting your butts off. Winning a football game like that would just kind of be like Notre Dame's here, man. Like they're here. So I agree completely. It would be a massive win if they're able to beat Ohio State on Saturday. And wanted to end this chat with Ryan Loftus, who said, thank you guys for the coverage and these shows, though. My excitement is on a level 100. So these are getting me by until game day. I think it's a great way to close the show, man. I am there with you. I can't wait until Saturday. Going to be big. Want to thank you all again for joining the mailbag and this podcast in general today. If you can, before you leave, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this podcast. If you're listening on a podcast platform, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. Again, tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk, 6 o'clock Eastern time. They're going to be doing their mailbag as well tonight. So if you want to hear Vince DiDario and Sean Stires break it down, you need to check it out at 6 o'clock on the IB Nation Sports Talk channel. Appreciate everyone again. Thank you all so much. Thank you to Sean Davis. I am Ryan Roberts. Thank you all so much for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast.